Alexis, you proposed this idea, and I know you guys have had a conversation about where you want to go with it. So why don't I let you take the lead for the moment?
Okay, sure. Thanks, John. I was chatting with Shoddy, for anyone that knows Andrew Schacht. Well, nicknames are things that stick with you when you're young, and because I knew him when he was young, it's hard to call him Andrew. So my apologies for that. But I was talking to Shoddy the other day, and as usual, it was just a fun conversation going in a whole lot of different directions. And so I said, do you want to do one of these things that John does? He said, sure. What would we talk about? And he came up with the idea of the future of beach volleyball, which I thought was a really interesting idea. So that was basically it. And in my head, I immediately went to a whole lot of different directions, even though I haven't been sort of closely involved in beach volleyball at the highest level for long periods of time for a while. But back in, I was involved on the World Tour sort of starting in 1996 for probably about 6 years, and then for a few years in the middle there as well, back when Shoddy was a player. And it just made me think that, I mean, Shoddy was involved on the World Tour from before I was until now, continuously, which is 27 years, Shoddy?
4 or 5-ish, something like that. Yeah, I was trying to recall, actually. It's too long, maybe.
So I thought the part of looking at what the future is what the present and the past are, and also thought it was an interesting idea, because often what is the present at the highest level are things that other people haven't even thought about or looked at yet, because usually it takes 2 or 3 years to practice the future before you actually are good enough at it at the highest level for people to even recognise those things. So that's where I thought the conversation would be interesting. And so why don't we start off, Shoddy, by you talking about what the present at the very highest level is.
Where do you start? I mean, the present at the moment is, and the present's a bit shut at the moment, but the present currently that we've been playing over the last 12 months is a game that looks really different than it did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's really evolving. The quality of athletes, the speed of the game, it's like all sport. It's getting quicker, bigger, faster, that sort of stuff. There's always been a traditional view about how beach volleyball should be played and how it sort of evolved and adapted out of the US, and which was the historical home of it, and for all intents and purposes still is. But a game that developed on the beach in the wind with conditions has now evolved to be played off the beach in closed stadiums in continental Europe. Olympic Games are often not on the beach. The last one was, but they're so closed in that the conditions you play in have changed so much. It's actually allowed the game to evolve and bring in a different quality of athlete. So, where the big kids, back in the day probably weren't maybe good enough or seen good enough, now the conditions and the things that are happening are letting them actually play. And so with that, it brings a whole different range of opportunities to play. So, traditional pass the ball in front. I mean, talking offense now, pass the ball up in front, set the ball up and down, go and do your job. That's still a big part of the game. But it is evolving, and it's starting to really sort of cross over and take some stuff from indoor volleyball, a lateral movement of setting, pass location, hitting ability. The game's more powerful now, men and women. So there's a lot more hitting, power hitting than there was, even 5 to 10 years ago. So that and the smaller court kind of brings that in too, because within 8x8 rather than 9x9 was a huge change. So, shooting the ball around, it still has its place, but maybe not as much as it did. The blocks are bigger. So, I mean, that's been the past, and we look now as what we've been doing, I guess, in Australia is playing an on-to system with potential jump setting as well the last few years, especially this cycle, and that evolved over time. I mean, we've been doing this on and off in Australia for probably 15 to 20 years. But this cycle, we had a real crack at it with all our teams in our national program. We've got 14 odd players, and I'm the men's coach and also the head coach, so able to influence some game style over time. And you're right, I think you said before, it does take time. It does take time to try some different stuff, but hitting the ball on two, taking the third contact out, trying to separate offense by setting the ball different regions, actually just trying to get a free net, a blocker that's running around, breaking them down is pretty much, and it's no secret, it's pretty much what we've been trying to do. And I'm not saying the rest of the world's copying us, because obviously we don't have like a million Olympic medals sitting on there. It's just been our way to kind of edge ourselves into the top echelon with our teams over the years to actually take on the big countries, the US, Brazil, some of the Europeans who, are volleyball countries with a big base that can push up big athletes and really take charge. So that ability for us has been something that we've worked on. This cycle especially, previous cycles we have, and it's bearing fruit. Our number one women's team was third at the World Champs, definitely using the on-two a lot, hand setting a lot, almost exclusively. And in the women's game, it's still a bit of it's not hand setting as much as, it doesn't happen as much as you would think. So we're trying to do some different stuff. So we're trying to teach your athletes a little bit of a different way. They're enjoying it. And of course you have to sell it that it's going to help you win. Because there's no point doing it because it looks cool and it's fun if you can't win. So we kind of join the dots of actually getting some competitive performances and winning the game. So, in a short nutshell, that's, I guess, what we're trying to do at the moment.
Well, that's a really interesting thing for me, because one of the periods of time I was involved with on the World Tour was around 2006, 2007, when Shotty was still playing, and around the time when he got a bronze medal at World Champs, for anyone that doesn't know. And the style of play that they had was, there was a lot of jump setting. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday in a bit of preparation for this was that there are a number of reasons for jump setting, or a number of benefits for jump setting. And they're not just to pretend that you're going to go on two, but also to speed up the offense. So a lot of that stuff's interrelated, but what I was interested in was you talked about selling it to the athletes. So when you were playing and you were being tried to convince to do this thing that no one else in the world was doing at the time, so this is probably back around 2005, what convinced you as a player that it was worth trying and not to just do the pass and run straight up and down, hitter has to beat the defender somehow?
To be brutally honest, I wasn't real good at the other thing. So, I was like, well, I've been trying that for a few years and wasn't super successful. So I was like, well, I'll give it a go, because, I felt like I'd reached my limit probably in what I was doing. I mean, I had an indoor background before I played beach volleyball. I played with the national team up until for a year in 95 and at national championships and whatnot with yourself and Mark back a long time ago. And, we hit a lot of quicker balls back then. And it actually, for me, made sense to be able to, it was just better for me to actually run an offense that was a little bit more related to running the ball faster. It just suited the style of the athlete that I was. And it suited Josh, my partner at the time too. He'd come from indoor. He was good at laterally moving quick, had a massive jump too, which helped. So actually, and we talk about the system. Yeah, the player needs to fit the system, but the system needs to fit the player. It's not revolutionary, but actually you have to combine some of that stuff too. So, I just felt at the time, well, I got nothing to lose. If we can go to another level, no one else was doing it. And that's the brave part too. When you're out there doing all these crazy things and they don't come off, like if you run that way and the set goes that way, and it happens, like literally, that is just, it's embarrassment times 1,000. So and that happened every now and then when you kind of learn the system and you're making mistakes under pressure, but you still have to keep trying, because it didn't take long for us to kind of get a little bit of value out of it. We started to push some teams around. We started to push some bigger blockers around. I was like, oh, it's actually working. So then once you get some success as a player, you feel a bit competent. You get a bit confident. It's that positive cycle you can get into after a time. So, it was effective. When we could deliver it, it was really effective. And we did, and it looked completely all over the place. But, that was the risk.
Yeah, I remember from watching a lot of video of you back in the day, there was a couple of clips of playing against Ricardo, who still plays on the AVP now at the age of God knows what. And just seeing him serve, then run to the net, then run sideways, then run the other direction, then retreat 2 steps as the ball got hit over his head into the corner. And I'm just thinking, this guy's the best blocker in the world, and he has absolutely no idea how to handle this. How do people handle it nowadays?
Well, they still don't like it, and I guess the evolution. I believe they don't like it anyway. I mean, I wouldn't like to play against a system I don't train against. So that's the other part as well. They don't actually train against it. It's tough to find it now. Back then, we kind of moved the ball around a fair bit. We hit on 2 a bit, but not as much. And the last few years in the program here, we've really pushed hitting on 2 from both sides. So really starting with the on 2. And so as soon as you get that blocker coming to the net, you've got, and most beach volleyball teams, 95% plus, are still made up of the blocker defender. So half the time you've got a guy running to the net. So if you can control the pass and take on the blocker, he's got to move a lot. So, for me, it's really important that we sort of think about the past, but go, well, how do we take that further? And we didn't hit, I didn't hit on 2 on the right side. Like my hitting hand on the outside, that was like, oh, that's impossible. But now we're doing it. And actually other countries are doing it too. And the pass location is changing all the time. So the old just pass it in front, set it up and down. Is that people are trying to shift the pass, shift the offense to different parts of the court, set it back, doing everything they can to actually shift the defensive structure on the smaller court with, these guys are out there now are big, they're 6'9", 6'10", 7 feet. It's a huge block. And yes, I did everything I could to get the hell away from Ricardo back in the day. He was a better blocker against me as a hitter, me just hitting a normal volleyball. I had no chance. So you just had to adapt to what you had, which was me, and what they had, which was him. And how do we beat a guy like that?
Yeah. Just from talking to you now, it makes me think about the fact that old school volleyball, which is talk about straight up and down, you basically, as soon as you've served the ball as a blocker, you know where the attack is going to come from, and you just kind of amble towards that spot. And I love on some of the old school beach volleyball stuff that gets posted, that's kind of exactly what happens. There's this kind of loopy serve. Guy wanders to the net to a point and is basically already standing there and just jumps straight up when it's time to jump. So effectively you're attacking a metre of the court, whereas now what you're talking about is trying to work out how to attack all 8 metres, or how to have a plausible attack at all 8 metres.
100%. And look, the game evolved, and I made mention of, out of the US, and, it was, it evolved in that way. There was a blocker, and we're all informed by the past. And I remember there were 2 schools of thought way back when. There was a Smith-Stokely, a blocker defender, and there was a Christ-Effis, and the guys both blocked, and the whole world went down the blocker defender way. So it only made sense that at some stage you could expose a blocker trotting to the net by actually having the ability to, change the pass angle, change the set angle, run different stuff. But also in the fact that the game came from beach volleyball was seen, and probably still is to a level, a very individual game. So, you've got your skill set, I've got mine. I'll call you up on the weekend, we'll go and play. As long as you've got a couple of things, I can do this, you do that. And then you just kind of work it out. Where the game now is evolving into a much more structured, I guess, team-based game, more professional. There's more people around the team. You're trying to actually run more of a structured offense, and a lot more thinking over the last few years has gone into offense. Beach volleyball has always been set up on the defensive angle. What does your defense look like? Who's your blocker? Who's your defender? What can you do? Score points, clearly. But now, we know with the point scoring system, you're going to score more hitting. You're going to score way more on offense, and putting offensive pressure on a team is pretty much a great way to get out there on the court and go and do your business. So a lot more thinking, I guess, has gone into the offensive systems over the last few years in beach volleyball as teams have spent longer together, and there's been some more program-based beach volleyball happening. So more teams are supported to do it over time, because it's pretty hard when you're a bit of a privateer doing your own thing, matching up with people to actually make it work, because you're going to need support as you start something, and inevitably it goes bad when you're trying something new before you get out the other side. And, if you're doing it professionally as a job, it's difficult if you're not winning.
Yeah. I remember, I reckon maybe around 2001, Dane Blanton had just won gold medal, and we were at Hermosa maybe, or somewhere in California, and just seeing him come out and train. And even then, I'd been doing it for 5 years. I was looking around for his partner, and no, there was no partner. It was just him and his coach. and someone stood on an old 44-gallon drum hitting balls, and I think Dane was defending, and then they packed up and left. And you can't build an offense with someone if that's how you train. And I'm sure that's not the only way he trains, but the nature, the old school nature of having a different partner each weekend, or unless you sort of at the top level, if you're winning, you keep the same partner, but if you don't, then you're constantly changing. It becomes very much about what you can do.
Of course. And you know what, he's a couple of years for gold medal, so why change? You know?
Yeah.
You know, often change comes because you have to. Like, to compete, you've got to do something. So if you're up there, as you know, and I was thinking the other when we're chatting, like the people that have come through and been just awesome at beach volleyball straight away. I'm thinking of the Kerry Walsh-Jennings, the Emanuels, the Ricardos. They bring such a ridiculously skillful set that sometimes they don't bother learning how to hand set or whatever. They're so good at some of the skills. They just dominate play. So, you know, but that's now where we're seeing even the top teams are starting to kind of push the game a little bit different, because it's just getting more and more difficult. The quality of the defense, the serving, the athleticism of the teams are having to actually push more stuff. So even some of the top teams are now going, if I want to get from 10 to 5, and that's a huge jump, I might need to try some of these things and think about it a little bit differently, to bring something different to the table.
Yeah, because the difference between top 10 and top 5 is 2 points, maybe 1, maybe 2 points a set, and that's about it. So
there's a huge difference. It's massive.
Yeah,
it's falling over the quarterfinal, making the top 4 each week, really.
Yeah. So think about I thought it was an interesting comparison, the idea that with beach volleyball, we're talking about 3 hits and 2 hits, so 2 and 3. And in the NBA at the moment, there's been, even though mathematically it's been clear for, let's say, 10, 15 years that a 3-point shot is better than a 2-point shot, it's taken a very, very long time for people to get out of that mindset of saying, basically, oh, that's just cheating. That's not how you're supposed to play, right? That's just cheap. And you never win like that, until someone finally did win like that. And now it's just kind of gone through the roof with just 3 points and getting to the hoop. I just thought that the 2 and 3 is obviously, that's as far as the analogy goes. But how do you think international beach volleyball is over the hump of just saying, you know what, 2's a really good idea, I'm going to find out ways to incorporate it into my game? Or do people still think it's a cheap way to win points?
I don't know if they think it's a cheap way. I think people can see the advantage. It's just if they're prepared to let go of what they feel is success. And if teams are having success at the top and they're already doing it, you got to give something up a little bit to go in a different direction. If you're giving up a lot of shiny things and success, it's difficult to make that step. Now,
innovations aren't normally made by the people who are winning.
No, exactly. No, you're completely correct. So, look, yes, it's happening. Is it structural? I mean, we make it pretty structural. There's some teams out there making it more structural. So back in the day, it was like, oh, free ball, so I'll knock it over there, bang, winner. Oh, sure, but that's not really the way you should do it. And so, are we over the hump? No, it's up there somewhere. It's going to take, a few of the players at the top, or the perceived players, to do some different stuff. And, I'm not sure if they will or they won't. And my vision of what the future looks like is my vision from the past. I'm saying it's like, I think it needs to get out this way. The 3 versus 2. I mean, I'm like everyone watching The Last Dance at the moment. I'm like, oh God, well, if you had that dude, Jordan shooting, 15-foot turnaround jumpers all day, why wouldn't you just keep doing that? But the ability to make 3-pointers or miss, the ability to go on 2 and miss at the moment, going on 2 and missing, it appears to be a huge mistake. As in, getting blocked on 2 or making an error on 2 is like, oh, well, the world's ending. But actually, the stats say that all the teams, our own and the rest of the world, when they do it, it's really high. I shouldn't say that, but they actually score a lot doing it. But when you make a mistake on it, other team stops it, there's a real maybe feeling from the other team like, yeah, we stopped their best stuff, you know. And it's like, well, if you get blocked on 3 or blocked on 2, what's the difference? You got blocked. You lost the point, right?
Yeah.
You don't then stop hitting on 3, right? Oh, well, we've just changed that. You know, you keep trying to do your same stuff. And it's the same theory with our teams. We've gone on 2. We're going to keep trying to push it. Now, you're only as good as the pass, so that's obviously something pretty critical too. It's better to locate that ball because you can't just pass it wherever you want. So you've got to think about that as a different concept as well. Like you're setting the ball off the first contact and you're hitting off the second and you're making decisions to maybe flick the ball. Ultimately, can you see the block and let it go? I don't know. Like how good are the players? How good are their vision when they're up in the air? Like, you know, you're thinking about some different stuff there that takes a long time to work too.
That's the, it makes me think about like indoor volleyball, from all of the data I've ever seen, running through the middle is the most effective. But from coaching indoor volleyball, convincing setters to run middle as much as they possibly can is always really, really hard. And then I ended up coming up with the theory that if for the setter, if they set middle and it doesn't kill, then they look bad. Whereas if they set to the outside, the ball's a long way away, and so it's not their fault anymore.
Yep. 100%.
It's the same sort of thing with hitting on 2.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Well, like a great analysis there. Like you said it, and the middle blocker gets blocked. It's like, oh, you made the wrong decision. Your middle blocker just might be a good blocker. They just haven't actually, you know, made a good hit. Get rid of the ball out of your zone. Oh, it's up to you now. So exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. You've got to take on the challenge, like anything. You've got to take on the challenge. It's me versus the blocker. I might have half a block, I might have no block, but I'm just going to take on that challenge. And once you learn how to hit the ball with some range, it's really effective. It just takes a bit of time. And obviously the next step is, can you release a set to your partner? You have no net. Like sometimes you get a free net and you make the defense look really silly, and maybe they're just like, then it feeds into their game. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of ways behind it to talk about why you should do it. It's just that convincing factor for athletes to go and actually try it and work on it and believe in it. And then make it their own. And, you know, I'm happy at the moment that this cycle, what we've gone 3.5 years now, and it's going to go longer. But the majority of our teams and our better teams and athletes are really taking on the challenge of the game style and they're having success with it in their own ways. Look, our women's teams have been really successful. Our guys have had some successful moments. You know, we're still working on it. But, you know, they enjoy it. They lean into it. They like doing it and they're getting success. So it's a nice thing to see. And they believe that it's what we do. So once that belief grows within them, they go out there and go, yeah, this is us. This is how we play the game. And each country, by the hook or crook or design or not, has something about the way they go and play the game. The US has something. They have their own way. The Brazil, the European countries. So this is the way we do it. Right? And so that's actually good. When you're jumping on a plane, I know you can't do that at the moment, but flying all around the world, you know, a long way from home, you've got to have something to lean on, you know. And when we get out there and go, this is who we are, this is how we play, it's actually quite powerful for us as a country, being on the bottom, training in a city on the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the world, of the country in the bottom of the world is, you know, it's kind of cool to get out there and show what we can do.
Well, that's one of the other things we were talking about. So the national program in Australia is based in Adelaide, which is where I've spent a large part of my life. I live in Singapore now. I've lived in the States, and it wasn't until all of the travel restrictions came in from the pandemic that I realised just how far away Adelaide is from everything else in the world. Like it's 9-hour drive to the closest city in Australia, more or less.
Yep.
Trying to fly anywhere. Do you think that isolation helps with innovation?
Yep, I think for sure. I mean, we miss the ability to jump in a car, a train, or a short flight and have a training camp. You know, we have to go to this flight 14 hours to Hermosa with our girls to get a training camp with some, you know, quality opposition, or take the guys to Europe or something. And that's the bad part of it, of the isolation being so far. The good part is that, you know, you're not really, you can try stuff. You know, you just go out on the courts and you try things, you know, and you're so far away. It's like, oh, well, we'll just try this and see how it goes, and, you know, give it a whirl in the training environment. You know, it's like we're a different country, the land of strange animals, kangaroos and koalas and whatnot. So, why not be different in what we do and use that as an advantage rather than trying to copy the world? We don't have volleyball is not a huge sport, as you know, in Australia. We've got a core group of volleyball and beach volleyball people that are super committed to the sport, but we don't have a lot of them. So, we don't have that huge base to go, we'll just push up and we have to go and make some really key decisions. And we have over the years with athletes about how we're going to play the game and back it in. And having the ability just to walk out the back on the courts and do it has been really good for us. It's allowed us to be free and expressive. We had a couple of years ago, a skill acquisition guy came to work with a local institute, South Australian Sports Institute from Canberra. And then, he wasn't having much buy-in from the rowers and the kayakers. They didn't want to change. He said, well, come out to beach volleyball, even though we're a national program, weren't affiliated with SASI. And he said, and I said, well, go for it. Just have a look, And it was really interesting because he didn't have any idea about beach volleyball. So we were doing jump setting, we're hitting on, just doing all this crazy stuff. And he's like, okay, that must be beach volleyball. So he just looked at it and went, I guess I'll help you get better in doing that, rather than going what's that? I should get none of the little people. That's not going to work. That's crazy. What are you doing? You should do it like this. So in the end, he's saying mate, why do you dig it and you spike it? You shoot it to each other and shoot it. And he had all these really, and I was like, mate, that's not going to work. So it was actually good because he was challenging us because he was not affected by beach volleyball, the culture around the world or what you should do. He's now gone back to Canberra running the place, so that's we lost him, which was not much fun, but he had a good time with us, and we really used him a lot because we just let him go and try some stuff, and that's been the whole, I guess, MO for the program. I've tried to push in the last year or two as head coach, but even before that, it's just we need to be innovators and we need to try things, and we need not be scared to try new stuff, and make it a place where we can learn and do things that are a bit different and feel okay about it. And that's the main thing. You have to feel okay about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The sport I'm involved in now is gymnastics, and gymnastics is very much you train for 3 months by yourself, and then you go and compete against other people. Then you train for 3 months. So you spend a lot of time by yourself, and it's actually a lot more similar to, I guess, how beach volleyball works in Australia, is that the coach and the athlete are trying to work out how, with the ability that my athlete has, what sort of skill can they do that can get them enough points to win, which is exactly the same as what you're talking about in terms of innovation for beach volleyball. How can we get enough points to win? And by not training on the beach at Hermosa, like you said, where you're in front of everyone every day, and there's that, what are they doing? Kind of fear. It's an opportunity to, I guess, to be creative, which is always, for me, it's much more interesting. One of the fun parts of coaching for me is being creative. And certainly there's a whole lot of research that shows that successful coaches are inquisitive and curious about things. So I think it's not something I thought about until we started talking today, but it's maybe a key part of the whole thing is just the isolation and the fact that you get the chance to try things without judgment.
I mean, I don't know the full story of the team, but the current number one men's team, the young guys from Norway, just kind of evolved their thing out the back blocks of Norway in their own little academy. Just taught themselves how to play, and away they went. It's pretty good athletes and some nice pedigree and beach volleyball behind them. But they've kind of created this thing, and now away it goes. So yeah, I mean, it's just different strokes for different folks. Really, you're either a prisoner of where you are, or you make it work for yourself. In a sport like ours, like around the world, it's not huge compared to other world sports. It's pretty much how you want to think about it every day. And my job now, apart from just coaching the guys, is actually to, I believe, help the other coaches when they get a little bit concerned or nervous about, is it going to work? Is actually just to keep promoting the idea of keep going at it, keep working, keep trying, keep trying new stuff with them and keep pushing the line, because, when it doesn't work and you try something different, everyone's on you straight away. It just happens. It's like, oh, it's good, but now it's terrible, so you should change everything in sport. people that fund and support. That's the battle you're fighting the whole time, really. And to try to make sure that you're getting results along the way and have that bigger picture of trying to win that Olympic gold medal in mind, so you can keep selling the vision, because it's going to take X amount of years, a cycle or 2 cycles or more, to get the athletes to that level to go and deliver. So you're always working behind the scenes to try and promote what you're doing. Of course, it's a results business. I don't get paid for a good time at the courts and trying crazy stuff. We get paid to actually deliver performance. So you're trying to make that balance as well. But you hope that when you start buying into it and creating a culture of this is why you do it, this is how you play the game, people get into it, that actually more than just the program of, a dozen or so athletes and the coaches, it starts actually expanding out there. And other people start seeing it in the country and go, oh, this is what we do. This is how we play. That's always an ongoing battle too, because everyone sees everything a little differently. And that's the other side of the argument of you buy yourself in one place all the time. People don't really know what you're doing. And so that can create an us versus them mentality even in your own country. So you're trying to juggle all these things constantly to try and get your message out there with your teams and what you're doing, to keep garnering that support so you can keep on the quest, on the vision, on the journey of this thing that we do.
Yeah. It's I'm trying to think of, so what other innovations have you seen over the last 25 years?
Well, the game, the game changed dramatically when the court changed and the net serve, and that was probably the sport innovating itself. I'm just talking about the ball changed. They changed the ball to make it slower because, and they'll probably have to do that again at some stage because the athletes are just hitting it too hard and it's full on. And maybe our job as coaches is to, we're talking about hitting on 2. Can we make the rally as short as possible? And that's boring potentially for the sport, but that's our job, is to try and win. So, the sport may push back at some stage and go, well, hang on a minute, if everyone's doing this, is rubbish. This is not volleyball. So we'll cross that if we come to it. Sorry, you go.
I remember when the court changed, and to some extent arguably it made taller people hitting hard more of a weapon. And I remember, I think it was in Norway or something, I was probably sitting behind a camera for you guys, and there were 2 American players behind me, and you guys would hit most of the time, hit hard most of the time, looking to tool the block and whatever. And these 2 American guys were just kind of, I could hear what they were saying. They wouldn't have cared who I was, because I was just up behind a camera, so I couldn't possibly have had any particular insight to anything. And they were saying, basically, it's all very well to do this, but they're just going to blow out their shoulders. And I thought about it, and I thought, actually, that makes sense. With the old sporting ball that's got sand all over it, maybe a bit of water as well, can you hit that ball that hard for that long? And probably the answer is no. But I also knew that at the time that concurrently with developing that game style, you were also spending freaking hours every day on TheraBand and shoulder and just shoulder strengthening so that your shoulders could handle that load. And so, yes, it was a different game style, but there's a whole lot more that went into it to enable it to happen. It wasn't just a let's try this kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, there was the S&C behind it. It was very specialised to us individually, very bespoke for our team and us as players. And we did hit the ball a lot and we did shoot it a lot. And the reason was that basically you didn't have time to take a look and shoot the ball because the ball's flying left, right and everywhere. Basically the looking, I look to see what's going on, that was taken care of by the way you ran the offense. So basically you just went up and delivered what you saw, and hopefully if you did the offense right, the block's moving, there's no form block, the defender's running this way, and you're having actually more opportunity to get the ball down. So, the game style that we ran begat the fact that we didn't shoot the ball a lot. I mean, you did it every now and then, but it actually, by shooting it actually took away the strength of the style. So we had to actually, and like I mentioned earlier, that style was more taken from bits and pieces of indoor volleyball, moving the ball around, trying to get one-on-one, 1.5, and hammering the ball off the block, in the blocker zone, or at the defender, or trying to go deep over their head. So it was a little bit different the way everyone was playing, rather than shoot away from the defender, get it over here, just try and trick them, make them run a certain way, because really, right, the blockers were bigger on a smaller court. The shooting was starting to go out of it, and we were just trying to actually be a bit more aggressive with that. And, and that was, it's funny, the question what you said about people behind looking, it's like we just wore that all the time. Like we just had to, like what are you doing? This is not beach volleyball. And I remember you talking about Hermosa. I remember turning up with a previous partner, Victor Anfiloff, my first sort of beach partner, played for a few years before Sydney. We went to Hermosa back in '97 with our white, blue and yellow World Series balls, and we literally laughed off the beach. That was a really formative time for me, because you're just going out and playing these old guys. They just want to kill you, and they're, what are you doing? And this is not volleyball. We're trying a few different things, and it was a good 5 weeks. It really was like you had to really lean into your style of what you were doing back then with your weird-looking volleyballs, going to the home of volleyball and saying, no, we're going to do it differently. So all those experiences kind of add up over time to go, well, if you're going to have a crack at something different, you have to be ready to wear the consequences. And it's not just winning the game. You've got to be ready to wear the slings and arrows of whatever's coming at you as if you're trying to innovate and change, like in any sport. And that's where you have to have high belief. Really important. Yeah. I think you said before, so I didn't really answer. You talked about innovations over the last 20. I mean, the game style, like obviously we're talking about, shifting the ball around, hand setting more, hitting on two. That's been sort of recently. I've seen teams try to run an I formation for a while, an Austrian team running the I formation on defense, on offense. What do you mean by that? Just passing I formation. So basically standing there and getting the better passer, better hitter to start in the backcourt and get the other guy to get out of the way. It didn't last very long. The quality of the serving was too good, but they tried it, and, I've seen, and potentially have I seen, or just making this up, you could get potentially the blockers to both, serve and have one blocker at the net, the other blocker at the net if you're running the system. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Sorry.
So yesterday we were talking about how to basically what the next step, what the defence against the innovations of the game will be. And I said that I was, I feel like I was at a World Tour event in Jakarta or something. It was my first ever World Tour event, or really early on the World Tour. This is back to the mid to late 90s.
I think I was
I suspect you were. And in my head, I had this thought, and I remember writing it down and talking to the head coach at the time. If this kind of keeps progressing, then I reckon both players are going to have to start at the net. I remember actually thinking that. And then when we were talking yesterday about it, I was too scared to bring up that idea because I thought it sounded too stupid.
It's been in the back of my mind for a while. It's like, and that's just you might have to do it. You might have to just stop this sort of stuff. And I've actually thrown it in training and got people to do it, and it's going to be pear-shaped because they don't really want to nuts, I'm not doing this. But and I was thinking also, that you talk about indoor volleyball, beach volleyball, and, you're taking stuff from indoor and whatnot. And, it's just the games are getting closer and closer all the time. So, and then I looked at some four-man video the other day. It's like, well, you're talking about the two blockers there, and all the blocker did when they set one was peeled off the net and defended. So there's possibilities. And actually beach volleyball, even though it feels like it has a lot of rules, with the handling, that's kind of loosening up. So really outside of that, apart from serving and rotation, do what you want. Go where you want on the court, right? There's no back row, there's no positioning. So you can actually literally do whatever you want to play the game. So if you're as good as your athletes, and the ability of your athletes to deliver it, and actually how you think about it. Now, of course, you're probably not just going to dig it back over and one and play with your head, it's a nuanced version of the high-level game, but you can actually play around with this stuff and think about things really differently because you're not really hamstrung by a lot anymore. And I think that's the next step is what can you do? What differences can you make? And you kind of have to build the picture and then go, well, what kind of athlete? And that's always the next question. Do I need, male or female to actually then go and make this thing work? Because you can have all the great ideas, but if you don't have the cattle, in the first part, then it doesn't matter.
But I remember reading.
Got a question here, Alexis, if I can squeeze it in. Simon says the court size and the score system changed in 2001. But what we have seen in more recent years is the length of match time decrease. What are your thoughts on why this is the case despite little to no change in the rules of the game? And how has this changed game style or training principles?
That almost sounds like Simon, who I work with, asking that question, but I won't. It's become, kill the ball as quick as you can, get to your 15 or 16 points. It's so offensive based now that it's crazy. In the old days, it was just, you did your side out, back and forward and tried to score your points. But as the game's getting the point for rally stuff, it's just squeezed down that time so much. And the level of the game has gone so athletic and full on that, the power game, as I said earlier, comes into it. It's just people who just like crushing the ball at each other, and being able to actually have great offense and stay on the court for that period of time then allows you to score your, 4 points a set to kind of get over the top. I'm not sure if I answered his question. It was a loaded one for sure, and I don't know if I answered his question properly, but anyway.
I think just to emphasise there, what you're talking about is basically you're looking at how am I going to score 21 points, and I'm going to get 15, 16 of them from kills, and whether that's first phase, second phase, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to have to find a way to score the other points. You'll get maybe 2 from opponent error, maybe, and that leaves whatever that is, 3 left, 4 left. And so depending on whether you're a good blocking team or good serving team, that means 2 aces and 2 blocks. And it's not a whole lot more complicated than that.
No, well surmised with your performance analysis stats background. Well done.
Maybe, yes. Like I said, it's not that complicated. That's it makes me think of another story though. It's the whole idea of innovation I find is fascinating. It's a lot of the time I would think a lot of people around the world are constantly innovating. I think really good coaches, really curious coaches are constantly doing that. But a lot of it you probably don't actually see. I remember when I was working at the Australian Institute of Sport, my boss gave me a research paper in, I think it was 2009. And he said, see, this is what they're doing in beach volleyball nowadays. This is what you should be doing. And I looked at it and I said, well, I was doing this about 11 years ago when I was working with them. I just never wrote a paper about it. The innovation, sometimes people think innovation is stuff that gets published or stuff that there's been a whole lot of research on and proven right. A lot of times coaches try things, yeah, that's good, I'm going to try that, or that, I don't think that's going to work, I'm not going to.
Well, 100%. I mean, there's the whole thing behind how we train these days. There's the statistics, performance analysis side, there's the physical side, there's the load management side, and all these things are here to inform us of how we should train. But at the end of the day, and they're all really important, don't get me wrong, end of the day, the coach watching the athletes actually perform and understanding the athletes they work with can then make the most critical decisions about what they could do next. And some of the best moments I've had coaching are when I know the jump numbers that we're measuring were getting close to where we should stop, but training was going really well. So I kept training going for 20 minutes and went, you know what? If it pushes them to a level, I'll work it out. But the next 20 minutes becomes this thing that then actually really takes them to another level. And I think there's always got to be room for that coach's eye, that intuition, that feeling. And I get, a good coach, I'm not saying I'm a good coach, but I'm saying the way you go about it, you should use all those things. But really, you need to know your athletes. You need to know where you want to go with them. And if you're feeling that there's this bit about to happen, don't stop it. Don't be the lid. Don't be the lid on that person then going bang or that team going bang. And that's where you have to really engage in what they're doing all the time. And you might sit there with your clipboard and da-da-da-da, but at some stage you just got to go, once this is happening, go away and let some things happen. And actually the athletes, I've seen the guys that I've worked with over the last 4 years come up with some stuff. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Well, you didn't do that. I haven't seen that before. and then you try to maybe, can we weave that into some stuff? So, the art, I suppose, of coaching will always, I believe that's, I don't have a huge science background at all, but I believe the art of coaching, being around them enough and having a vision is always the thing that's going to drive stuff forward. Then you add those bits around as you move forward.
Yeah, there's, I was with I'm very fortunate I get to spend time with some of the best gymnastics coaches around the world nowadays. And it was with a British coach. He got asked at the end of a training camp, so if you had advice for these junior coaches, what would it be? And his advice, and gymnastics is super structured. Like training, you have 12 minutes on each apparatus and then everyone rotates to a new apparatus. And if you break that, then you're in big trouble. That's just unheard of. And his advice to developing coaches was, if you feel like you're about to do something really cool or really new or something, don't rotate, screw it. just stick with it, be reasonable, but don't miss those opportunities for creativity and evolution just because you're sticking to the structure. Also, gymnastics is notorious for completely overtraining and breaking people, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, 8-year-old kids. Oh my god, you're difficult.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. This isn't the forum for that. John, I think I saw another question pop up.
It was just a follow up, with the respect for the time. Darren was just commenting on referees are encouraged nowadays to speed things up between rallies.
I saw that. That's 100% correct. The 12-second rule is just being enforced. And back in the day, I remember when I was playing, we definitely had and I look at the video now, it's quite brainy, but people just took forever. We'd all have our routines, our gardening, our walk around, and that was even with new scoring systems. So, the game is really getting pushed. He's completely correct.
Yeah, I'm so glad. It used to kill me watching those games. It's like, just serve the ball, for God's sake.
We did it. We did it on purpose. We had a routine where we went to this point, and as you remember, and we just were like, no, we're doing it, and everyone knew we were doing it, and I'm not saying we were the reason, but definitely they were like, hang on, this is going to look, rubbish on TV because, after 30 seconds, just waiting for something to happen, and then we passed the ball and hit it on 2, and then rally's over in like 2 seconds.
Yeah,
so less action, more walking around.
Yeah. So, I want to go back. The idea in everything in society, everyone's talking about being innovative, and there's a couple of great lines. It's like, if everyone's talking about thinking outside the box, maybe the problem is what the box is, not everything else. But the nature of, and you talked about the Norwegians who just kind of had their own little space and became crazy good, like crazy good. Is it, for most sports, there's this kind of idea of pyramid countries. So in a pyramid country, you have 10,000 juniors or 10,000 kids playing, 1,000 juniors, 100 seniors, and out of them you end up with 10 good ones. But if you start off with 50 people instead of 10,000, then it doesn't matter how good your good ones are, you've got to find a way for them to win. So you can't just say, okay, this method will win. So arguably, and I know this is actually a bit unfair on Brazilian because I know there's more to it than that, but Brazilian being super skillful, whatever, that takes time. And so you just wait for those people to evolve and progress through. And that works if you've got 100,000 at the bottom. And there will never be 100,000. There will never be the same ratio at the base in Australia compared to Brazil, compared to, I mean, for me at the moment, Singapore, Australia might have 100, Brazil might have 1,000, Singapore has 10. And so I know my job is about how can we get them to be as good as they can possibly be and have all 10 of them still going 5 years from now, rather than just train the crap out of everyone to do the thing that we know will work if we get good enough at it, and the top 3 or 4 will end up being good enough and they're going to be competitive no matter what. So where was my question in that? Was that a question or a statement? I can't remember how it started.
What do you do? I guess. What do you do? We don't. You're saying I don't live in a country, a pyramid country, and John does, but we don't. So, and you're up against trying to beat those countries in your given sport. Obviously historically in beach volleyball, the US and Brazil have dominated. Brazil's dominated probably more on the World Tour wins over the years, and the US, through some incredible athletes over the time, has probably, been better at Olympic Games, you would say, at some of the bigger events. I should know that better, but, roughly. And so we've got, we don't have this pyramid. We don't have, so we don't have this. So it's kind of got to look like this, where you can hopefully enter. Okay, I was too wide. That's, hopefully you can enter at some stage along there. And this is our ongoing debate, it's not a battle, I shouldn't say that. It's a debate in Australia. We would love to have a base with meritocracy. We'd all love it. We'd love to have more kids. We'd love to take the 6,000 million kids that play, all those kids that play Schools Cup and indoor volleyball, or 5,000 of them, and have, maybe 10% actually feed through the system, rather than potentially, I don't know, it's ridiculously low levels who would actually, again, keep playing volleyball. It says a whole bunch of kids play volleyball. They just go off and do other things, and we can't retain them. And we could sit here and talk for 17 years about why we don't do that, but that's not the point. The point is that we're always going to have to go and find good kids, either in volleyball or out of volleyball, and grab them and actually, unfortunately, institutionalize them earlier than we probably would like to. I'd love for a kid to go and do other sports early on. I'd love for them to go and have different experiences. I would love for them to go and learn things by themselves, compete, how to, wins and losses, and just living life before you actually get them, and have all these things happen to then actually make them a more well-rounded competitor. But that's la la land. Like, we don't have that. So actually you have to get them, you have to put a whole bunch of things around them from an early age and support them really well. And the issue with that is that, you set an expectation that maybe they're not always going to work as hard as they should to get things if they've already felt they've made it. Now, I'm not saying that does or doesn't happen, but there's definitely a mindset with that institutional model. The really positive stuff is you can get with them all the time and work on them and get them to do stuff and show them the way, and they can be around like-minded people. The other part is, have they gone through the thick and the thin? Are you paving the way? You're becoming like a helicopter parent, a lawn parent as much, and getting around some of those things. So what our biggest probably issue in Australia is what we'd like more of, and we're always working on as a sport, is more competition at earlier ages in beach volleyball for kids. Because we know that if a kid, let's say we get them into the sport, and then you've got the whole, do they do indoor volleyball or beach volleyball, and it becomes that issue, whatever that is. And then we know beach volleyball is more difficult for a kid when they're 14, 15, 16 than indoor volleyball is. It's just harder to play beach volleyball 2-on-2 in the sand, in the sun, in the wind. And if you're a young kid, like a young male, and you're 15 and you've already learned how to thump the ball, you've already got it going, you go out on the beach and you're falling over, I know what I'd want to do. I'd probably want to stay inside and try and hit the roof, and so you get all this stuff as well that we find in our sport. So when we get ones that we want to work with, and we need to do a lot of stuff with them to make them have that 7 to 10 year experience, and all those sort of things. So it's really important that we can support them along the way and just deal with the lack of maybe some of the things we miss without having that big base.
Yeah. Go on, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, on that note, we've got a question from Gloria, who wants to know, in your view, should juniors be encouraged to play both indoor and beach, or should they be encouraged to choose? And if so, when should that decision occur, in your view?
Great question. I think they should, if they're volleyball kids, they should learn how to play volleyball. I think they should do beach volleyball in the summer. In the winter, they should go in the gym and play indoor volleyball. And up to a certain age, and debate the age, they should play all the positions. They should learn how to set, pass, and hit, do everything, serve, whatever you want. Teach them as much as you can about everything as you can, And then down the track, if they're good enough, they have a broader experience to make it an informed decision. When should they do it? Now, countries are doing it in national programs earlier and earlier. We're kind of looking at around the end of school age, around 17, for a kid who's probably talented at both to maybe make a bit of a call about where they want to go and what they want to do. I know other countries are now doing it earlier. Germany is looking at around 15 to 16. But you have to give a kid experiences, and that's the thing. They need to have an experience in both parts of the sport. But even if you can't do that, all the volleyball people out there watching, and if you have influence with juniors, make them do everything. Give them an experience in volleyball that is not just about trying to win that junior tournament and you're a middle blocker and that's all you do. All right, please teach them how to play the game and teach them all the skills. You'll do them a favour in a few years' time, and you'll give them more opportunities to play at a different level and do a whole bunch of different stuff rather than getting caught up on just what is in front of your face right there and winning your school tournament or whatever it is. And I'm not trying to say that facetiously. It's really easy to do because we all want to win, and the kids need to learn how to win too. But really, all of it, teach them everything. The games are going like this. It's standard indoor. The net's here. The game. There's not a lot of difference anymore. So please do them a favour and give them all the chance of game.
And to add on to that, there's a heap of research that says that's actually the best for adolescent development. There's a fantastic podcast. It's called The Science of Sport, where I've forgotten the name of the guy, Rob someone. He's talking to Epstein, who wrote the Talent Code and has written a more recent book about basically junior development. And
no, Epstein did not the Talent Code, because that's Coyle. He did the Sport Gene.
The Sport Gene, yeah. Epstein did the Sport Gene. His most recent book is about junior development, basically. And
yeah, it's called Range, right? We talked about it this morning.
Of course. and basically, I haven't read the book, but I listened to the podcast, and they just shoot down all of the myths about early specialization, about a whole lot of stuff. And just kids like to be involved in sport. They like to play. They like to learn. They like to be with their peers. Parents and coaches like to win a lot more than kids do. So put them in situations where they can compete. If they win, they win. That's great. If they don't, that's okay. Being competitive is important, but putting your best 4 kids on the court and leaving 5 kids on the bench for the entire game just so you can win is just mean. There's no reason for it in terms of looking after the interests of the child. So anyway, that's my rant on that. I feel like it might be about time to wrap up, John. How are we looking?
If you guys want to go a little bit further, I'm fine. I'm curious actually to hear a bit about the analytics and technology side of things, where that's at these days and where it might be going.
Not my area of expertise. It should be. I mean, the analytics side is, we use our program we've developed here, HT Stats, and it's our own little thing that we've developed with our Chow. Alexis, I'm sure you obviously know what I'm talking about here. And, we're trying to dive deeper and deeper into the analytics. So, in the past it was stick the camera at the back of the court, take some stats, and hopefully you get enough out of there to create something. And now we're looking at, how much, and of course it's as much as you can get in, obviously, as you guys know, how much tape you can get on people. So obviously you need a trend over time. But, from my point of view, I might hand over to you, Alexis. You probably still know way more about this than I do.
So in terms of stats, there's no data volley for beach volleyball. Although some countries do use data volley. I don't know if they still do. I remember they did for a while.
They still.
Yeah, but very much. I know the Australian program developed its own software, and there's been a few iterations of that over the decades now. God. And there's always been a trend in Australia to be more analytical, because it was seen as a possible advantage, because at the time no one in the world was doing it. So back in 96, 97, there might have been one camera at the back of a court. And then I'd go home and do some analysis on it and put it into a database and build it from there. I mean, things are much more sophisticated now. Probably this country is doing stuff that people don't know about. I know some German, this is a long time ago now, but some German stuff working with universities looking at more hardcore analytics for beach. The hardest thing is to get hold of the data, because that's time consuming and it usually takes dedicated resources. But the reality is in beach volleyball, it's the same as indoor volleyball. What's the skill? What's the variation on the skill? Is it a power? Is it a shot? Whatever. How well was it executed? Where was it executed from? Where does it go to? Once you've got that data then and the score, then you can do any analysis that you want or that you can think of. The limit is in the ability of the analyst. Luckily, and so really it's then about the creativity and then what do I do with it? So it's different systems, but it's the same basic premise as indoor volleyball have been doing since Burrs and Throat Scout.
I've actually probably focused more in the last few years as we've tried to build some of the teams on the offensive stuff for our side of the court more than anything. Our proficiencies, our side out, the percentage stuff, and just try to get some just idea about how we're going to actually make this thing work. And, and all go back to on-two, all of it says that, the on-two stuff is through the roof, percentage-wise. So, you got I think that's going on. It's great to have that backup. So, and, we can have all the data we want on the opposition, but your team has to be able to take it in, deliver it, focus on their own game. So you're always playing with that. How much information is too much information? And given that you can't, and again, I can't step in the indoor world. I've been at it for so long. Given that the players have to go and play the game by themselves, they have to make decisions on the run. You can only give them so much information to then go, I've got a few options here, and if this happens, this happens. So you don't have the coach on the side of the court as an indoor maybe making some decisions for you. Although I know probably good coaches probably would try to make less decisions and let the players make all the decisions anyway in indoor volleyball, like in beach volleyball, because you have to. So it's always about, again, how much data you have, how much can they take on board, what's really key. And, you can go down the wormholes and the rabbit holes all over the place. It's just got to fit what you do. And then the type of athlete that you have that can take on that ability, that level of information.
Yeah, and maybe to wrap it up in some ways, going back to, again, when Shotty was a player, the coach he had worked out, and he actually worked it out by hand, I think, not by analytics, that getting X number of slide outs in a row twice a set means that you're almost always going to win. And then basically every single drill that you did for the next 5+ years was about achieving that. And if I recall correctly, every time you did that except one, you won the set.
Completely correct. I think the game we lost was like 16-14 third set.
Yeah, Emmanuel Ricardo. Well, no, Emmanuel. God, what's his name? In Paris, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a little bit of noise around the edge of it. But yeah, it was, if you're prepared to do the work and find out what needs to happen, and then the numbers, at the top end, they don't lie. You side out a certain percentage, you're going to win. Doesn't matter what you do point scoring. You get your proficiencies high enough and you're probably going to deliver. You get inform your training and away you go.
Okay, Gareth has a question with regards to player innovation or players who are innovative. Hang on one second. He wants to know which players/teams on the women's side in particular stand out for you when you think of innovation on the World Tour.
Look, I'm not as familiar with the women. I've had to be over the last sort of year and a half as I've taken over the head coaching role, and I can only talk for our girls at the moment. And I'm going to say that our team is probably, and they're top 5 team in the world, so I'm probably only looking at the top sort of 10. I think our girls are doing, our left side player, Talika Clancy, goes a lot on too. always trying to separate, move the ball around. The girls are trying to handset, run behind, run in front. So they're actually taking on a lot of the work over the years that has been done, in the program and maybe from the men's side, and actually with their coach Kurt Pittman have been really pushing that over the last couple of years to really be a point of difference. Because at the end of the day, like if I look back at the world champs where they came third, like Talik was 184, what's that, 6'1", and Maria Faye's about 5'10", and they were playing, Ross Kleineman, and I think Alex Kleineman's about 6'5", and Haven is about 6'5", maybe a bit taller, and our girls were actually looked a little undersized, to be honest, but they had a style. So I think, and I was thinking about this, and I'm glad it came up, the real opportunity in some of these things is actually in the women's game, because the women's game is still, for whatever reason, a little bit like, you can't even get a lot of the women to handset still, even some of the top women, and they don't really want to change a lot of stuff they're doing. Now, don't ask me why, if it's coach-led, if it's player-led or whatever. I haven't coached enough women's volleyball, beach volleyball over the years, but to actually go and find athletes that can fit a mold and take the risks, maybe it's a risk, I don't know, sounding highly sexist, I didn't mean to be, maybe take the risk to actually play the game a different way. There's a real opportunity there on the women's side, because it still is looking a bit like the men's game did. We kind of look at it and go, the men's game maybe pushes some things out and maybe the women catch up a little bit. Again, don't ask me why. So yeah, opportunity to handset the ball, to hit onto, every now and then the girls in training might let a jump set go and they go, oh, I forgot about that. But, so it's funny the way that kind of works. So if I was a beach volleyball coach, I'd be like, well, what does the future look like? I'd be like, can I go get a couple of kind of tall athletic girls and teach them a different style of game and give them a chance to go and do it? I think you could be highly successful down the track, because I still think the game's a little bit, and again, the top level, why would you change? If you've got big girls at the net dominating, banging the ball, they probably wouldn't change either. But if you don't, you make an innovation. And if you can get the athletes of that quality, then go and take that level to another one, then, wow, look what you could have.
Yeah, and if Misty and Kerry can win for 15 years or whatever it is without handsetting once during that time, then that's the model that works.
100%. But yeah, no one could beat them at their model. So, I mean, obviously you had a once in a transcendental athlete in Kerry Wall, and Misty was very good as well, but you had a 6'3" kid that was running around doing, hitting the ball, serving tough, like just dominating the play, and those players can do that sort of stuff. So, but you're correct, no hand setting. I mean, Emmanuel never hand set for sort of 15 years. He used to on the world tour, went to the States and played with Loyola and then just put his hands away forever. Never did it again. So if you can get away with it, yeah, you just do it. But I guess we're talking about opportunities to be innovative and try different things. And it just takes people to lean into the risk that it may not work out. And that's just the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing every day, for everyone to turn up to work and go, I'm going to take a chance today. And I have to take people with me to take on the risk. And we're going to have to keep doing it. And it's going to be difficult. And you do need support, I believe. You either need to be completely cuckoo and go off by yourself with a team and just do your thing, or you need the support of a bigger group around you. I think it's really, really either or.
And that's the thing for me, that the other talk that I did on this, that John allowed me to do, was on high performance and development. And in Australia, high performance means that you have to win medals at the Olympics. That's the reason that you get funded. And so anything other than that, if the cap is being 10 during doing this style of play, then it's not going to work. So for me, I always actually felt though it was a lot less of a risk, because if you can be good enough at this, you know that this can win, but you know that you're never going to be good enough at the other thing, because other people are just better at it, and it's really hard. So I always felt like it was a lot less risky than people made out.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's just to sell to the athletes to do it. It's to sell on their peers now. It's to sell to go out there and be that person that's going to, armor up and go and take it on, And I think maybe back in the day when we were doing it and it was all a bit nutty, and, the world's different now. really different today, but, you know, the social networking connection, everyone knows what everyone's doing. There's a lot of like, you know, there's just, you know, you have to be, maybe social networking helps us do different things, but also maybe it pushes conformity as well. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's something in that for me, trying to fit in a little bit. And, you know, for where we're sitting in our country, if we want to fit in, we won't stand out. We have to try and stand out every day in what we do to actually stand out. You know, fingers crossed, we get our boys back to Olympic Games, and it's been a little bit too long, and we've got our women's team right in the slot to grab a medal. And you know, and they're playing a style of game. They're actually doing it. They're going on they're playing aggressive. They're switching the ball up. They're changing setting. It's really good to see. It's a bit like, you know, is this a start of something for us or the end? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about that all the time.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. No more questions on my end. If anybody's got anything left, feel free to fire it in. Any additional comments, observations, anything from you guys?
Just thanks, Shotty. It's I knew I'd enjoy the chat. Hopefully other people got something out of it too. But it's the whole idea of innovation and the risks involved, like we talked about, I find really, really interesting, and it's the fun part of being involved in high performance sport for me. So thanks for the chat.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity. It's pretty nice just to talk volleyball, and you actually start talking about stuff you haven't thought about for a while. So I'll walk away from this and go, oh yeah, right. I can spark up a few ideas, and I've got plenty of time to sit around and think at the moment. Not running any trainings. Everything's done on Zoom and lifting and whatnot, and trying to kind of fill the days a little bit. So this type of stuff is really interesting and cool. So thanks, John and Alexis, for the chance.
Yeah, thanks, John.